Hello! So I had a whole video that I had planned out and ready to go. Well, not ready to go, it wasn't edited for today. But then I came across this video by a fellow Authortuber, Meredith E. Phillips. She was mostly talking about her Preptober plans, but she referenced in the video how she'd come across on a forum thread someone talking, venting, I guess, about how Authortubers never finish anything. And it kind of got me thinking about it, and I ended up having this really long discussion yesterday with my wife about it, and about whether it's true and why it might be that that would be the presentation that somebody, the conclusion rather, that somebody's come to, the presentation that Authortube is putting out there, whether on purpose or unintentionally. And it got me thinking about the whole creative process in general, and I realised that there are two main reasons that Authortubers never finish anything might be the thing, whether it's the reality or just the perception. At its base, there are two main reasons this could be I'm going to call it the presentation. Reason number one is simply that you, as an Authortube viewer who potentially is never intending to write a book, you are being let into part of a creative process that you wouldn't otherwise be familiar with. Like big name authors who don't have Authortube channels, they only talk about what they kind of want to talk about when they're being interviewed and stuff, and if they never get interviewed they never really talk about this kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can absolutely share as much or as little of your writing process as you want, but I do think that with the way that the YouTube sort of algorithm and whatnot is all set up, that you're expected to put out videos on the regular, and most people put them out at least once a week. Some Authortubers putting out 2 or 3 videos a week. I am clearly not one of those, because I do it every other week, because otherwise I just can't keep up, because there's a lot of work involved, but we'll get to that in a minute. But because of all of that, there is this sort of push to put out more videos and to come up with more content. And hey, when you're writing books, what's a really easy piece of content you can put out there into the world? Oh yeah, talk about your projects. So there's an invitation into a world that would otherwise be invisible. The idea of the solitary writer, which I want to make a video about at some point because it's a lie, but the idea of the solitary writer kind of comes along with the idea of this, I can't remember what is it savant? Is that the term, or is that the term that's also an ableist term? I can never remember. Words are hard, I'm dyslexic. Happy Dyslexia Awareness Week. But the idea of this genius writer, as it were, the writer who just every time they sit down they write 100,000 words of book and it's all good stuff. That's just not the case, but a lot of people have in their minds this idea. I literally cannot think of anything that has any movie that has a writer in it off the top of my head apart from Love Actually. So we're going to use that as an example. But in Love Actually, you see Colin Firth's character trying to write a book, and as much as logistically we the audience are supposed to understand that there is a fair amount of time covered in Love Actually, we don't actually process that, because all we really see about him is basically him pounding out words. And some people can do that, absolutely. They can just pound out words. Doesn't mean any of those words are good. There is the moment he jumps in the lake with the pretty Portuguese girl. I think she's Portuguese, I can't actually remember, it's been a while. But they jump in the lake to rescue his manuscript, and he's there this is all shit, don't do it, don't waste your energy like that, because it's not good stuff. And that's exactly what this Authortubers shelving and putting away and putting down forever and putting into the trash these projects is this invitation into the creative process. And there's a lot of the creative process that never gets to see the light of day. There's so many pieces of the creative process that other people, people who aren't in the thick of it, in the mire of it, would never otherwise have access to, because when you're being interviewed, you get to decide what you want to say. You get to decide whether you want to freely admit to the whole world that actually sometimes your ideas are shit, or sometimes you can't finish a story that you really wanted to be able to finish because you don't have the skill level, or you've realised that you've written yourself into a corner and the idea of having to start over to be able to write yourself out of that corner is just too daunting, and actually you don't really want to bother with that. Or, hey, actually I'm much more interested in doing this project instead of that project, so maybe I'll come back to it and maybe I won't, because I want to do this instead. Which I know a lot of Authortubers also talk about don't follow the shiny new idea, and I have like rejected that concept personally. But at the same time, I do have a publishing plan. I have a primary project that I work on, and everything else is secondary to that. I have theoretical branches for my publishing plan. My plan is to finish the Guardian Cadet series, and then I have like 2 or 3 options, depending on what's finished and what draws my attention. And as scary as it is to think that I might be publishing my 10-novel sci-fi series, is it 9? I can't remember. My decade-long sci-fi series, that might be the next thing. As daunting as that is, it might be the next thing, but it might not be, because I don't know yet, because I haven't finished enough projects to see what would come next. And that's not a piece of the publishing process and the writing process that people are normally brought into, because when you are traditionally publishing, as was kind of the only option for such a long time, and is still where most of the big name authors come from, you don't get to see any of those things, because so much of the inner workings of traditional publishing is shrouded in this layer of mystery that, as much research as I and other authors have done into it, you don't really get that full clarity on unless you are working in traditional publishing. Like, I follow an author on Authortube called Liselle Sambury, who's a Canadian author who's traditionally published. She mostly writes young adult books. She sort of vaguely talks about it and how much she has to keep projects under wraps, how much she's not allowed to talk about projects until or unless they do or don't get picked up by publishing houses. She has to keep so much of it completely to herself. And that is where I think there's this interesting dichotomy, because self-publishing authors, or authors who intend to self-publish, don't have that rule of silence. They get to decide for themselves how much they want to share, because hey, guess what? We're the ones who are doing the rules, because we're the ones who are in charge. And I think that's where a lot of these problems come in, is that we get to talk about stuff that we're excited about, but then if we never publish it, we never publish it. And it sounds like we've never finished it. But on the other hand, maybe an author aiming for traditional publishing might finish a novel, say they're going to shelf it, actually be querying it because they just don't want to share their query process, because they don't want to admit that they got rejected or something. Or like when they've got people who are watching their Authortube channel who are really hyped up and excited for a project, they don't want to be there like, hey, so you know that project we were all really excited about? Nobody wants it, sorry. Like, and then they're going to have to fend off all of those people being there like, just self-publish it, self-publish it for us, we'd buy it, self-publish it. And while they absolutely could do that if they wanted to, the thing is that they're aiming for traditional publishing, and 9 times out of 10 when you're aiming for traditional publishing, you don't want to self-publish. Like, most people don't actively want to do both. Some people do, props to them. Do as you will. The other half of this that made me think is how much of our creative career time, which is what I like to call it, like, it's the time you have specifically for your creative career. So like the time you have to write, the time you have to make YouTube videos, the time you have to like do your social media marketing, the time you have to learn the things for doing all of the things that you need to do for your creative career and the specific paths you want to take. All of that jazz is put in a finite amount of time. Whatever the situation, everybody has a finite amount of time to spend on their creative career, and maybe there's some wiggle room there. Like, I spent until 7 o'clock last night, maybe 7:15 last night, doing short story stuff because I was running late, because a bunch of random life stuff happened before then which cut into my creative career time, and that's just one of those things that happens because life is unpredictable and chaotic. But we all have a finite amount of creative career time, and if you're spending up to 50% of that doing Authortube stuff, potentially more if you are doing more videos. Like, I'm spending about 50% of my creative career time doing these YouTube videos, and I only do one every 2 weeks. But to be fair, my laptop is like, oof, how old is she now? 8 years old. She's on her last legs. I don't have any money to buy a new one, however, so we do what we must. We make it work. It takes me like a day to edit these videos, which is a nightmare because a lot of the time I'm filming them on the day they have to come out, especially because my week now starts on a Thursday. It's not important. The point is, we all have a finite amount of time to do creative career stuff, and Authortube really does eat into that time, especially the more of it you are doing by yourself. Like for me, for example, because I cannot speak for anybody else and I wouldn't try to, I have to ideate, as in come up with an idea, including doing things like research of what other people are doing on Authortube. That is a thing that you need to do. You don't need to, but it's a thing that can be useful to do. So you have to ideate your videos, potentially script or make notes for your videos, which I haven't done in a couple of weeks, but you know, it's a thing. You have to film the video, you potentially have to refilm the video if the audio's crap, if you get interrupted halfway through because somebody's at your door, or the cat needs something, or the dog needs something. This is turned into a you, but it is an I. Which inevitably, almost every time I get interrupted, I have to restart the whole video because I can't remember what's already been. And my camera, also very old and broken, so the touchscreen doesn't work anymore, which means I can literally turn it on and press record, and everything else I have to do on a computer, so I couldn't like rewind and rewatch where I've got to. No, I'd have to take out the memory card, plug it into a computer and rewatch, at which point you might as well have started over again anyway. So yeah, potentially refilm it. Then go into editing, which will take me up to half a day depending on how, can take me half a day to a day depending on how rested my computer is, how much is going on behind the scenes that I don't really know about, and how generous my editing software is feeling. And all of this stuff sounds a bit insane when you say it like that, but that is the situation that I live with because my computer is old and my camera is old and I don't have any money. And then finally you've got to do your thumbnail and your description and your cards, your subtitles if you can manage them, which I can't because I'm far too dyslexic for that. Your titles, your social media posts about the fact that you're making YouTube videos, and all of that kind of stuff. And it does take a lot of time to do all of those things. And this is just me speaking about my own personal experiences. It takes a while, and that while eats into your writing time. And herein lies the potential why Authortubers never finish anything. Is, what if that time that you haven't spent writing because you've been doing other creative career stuff, and bearing in mind that you also have to do any marketing you have to do on top of that, what if the reason that these projects get shelved and never get picked back up again is because the author doesn't feel connected with that project anymore because they've moved out of the era of their life where they wanted to, could, or were the appropriate person to tell that particular story. And all of that is very much an internal choice. You absolutely make your own, you have your own feelings about this, you make your own decisions about it. It's not something somebody can put on you from the outside. Anyone of any age can write a young adult book. There's no reason that anyone of any age couldn't. I know I wouldn't want to. It's not my jam. But one of the things that I found quite interesting was that while I was writing the second Guardian Cadet series book, I was feeling a lot of disconnect in the beginning stages, and by the time I got towards the end of the novel, and where I am now, which is it's out with proofreaders and that kind of stuff, getting close, I was feeling this massive amount of disconnect from the novel, and this feeling of a heaviness, a weight to it, not in oh my god this is heavy but it's so worth it, but I feel like I've been carrying this around for days. What's happening? I feel like I've been carrying a really heavy backpack for days, and I was trying to figure out why. I know that I would have been able to write the second of these books quicker if I didn't do YouTube, but I also know that it would have been quicker to write the book if I didn't do YouTube, if I didn't have to do my own social media, if I didn't have to spend my creative career time doing all of the other stuff that's involved with a creative career. And I also know that if I had written it faster, I probably wouldn't have such a sense of weightiness about it. It wouldn't feel so heavy. I wouldn't feel so disconnected and so desirous to stop doing it. And thankfully I have reached the end, so I can stop doing it. But, which is like quite a relief, which I know is just probably part of writing a big project in a smushed up timescale. Like, again, it took me 3 years to write this book, not including the original ideation. It took me 3 years to write this book properly, from 2018 to publication day in 2021. And a lot of that time wasn't spent writing this book. This book took me like a year and a half. But it took me a year and a half in little pockets of time. Whereas the second book in the series has taken me a year and a half, smooshed into a very, very concentrated effort where I didn't really get to do anything else. I did NaNoWriMo 2021, so I didn't have to do it then. Didn't do it then. And then I did Camp NaNoWriMo in 2022, so in April, so I didn't have to do it then. And I took time off while I was moving house, and I took time off while my beta readers had it. But that's pretty much it for the rest of the time of that smoosh of year and a half in one go. It has been in one go. There's been these tiny pockets of not doing it. But to do this one, it was more like pockets of doing it. And as much as I might like to be able to write like this again, I know that's not possible when you have a publishing plan. And I wonder if some of that comes into this whole discussion, if it's the thing of not only do we Authortubers end up spending a lot of our creative career time doing Authortube, and therefore have less time to do the book stuff, and therefore are more likely to run out of steam for that book before we reach the end of it. And also whether it's the thing of just, because we have less creative career time, we have less creative career time to explore other projects, so it's kind of easier to shelf stuff to get the time to do other stuff. Or even if it's just the case that we talk about so many different projects, but everything needs time to breathe and write. It's like making bread. Have you ever made bread where you have to knead it for a while and then you have to let it rest and rise and proof and bake and all of those things? And you're not actively doing anything to it in those periods of time, you're just letting it kind of breathe. But it's a vital part of bread making, because if you just mixed the ingredients, kneaded it and shoved it in the oven, you wouldn't have bread that was tasty and enjoyable to eat. You'd have like a lump of nonsense. And that's such a huge part of creative careers, but it's also very hard to communicate it to other people because there's very little else that needs to be able to breathe like that. Most people with career stuff, unless they are bakers of bread, don't really have that connection with stuff has to be left sometimes. Like a painting has to be left to dry, bread has to be left to rise, and writing projects often need to be left to breathe. You need to step away from the project to be able to see it more clearly, and you can't step away from the project if you are right down in the central streets of it. So I feel like I didn't really answer the question. But I wasn't setting out to answer the question, I was mostly just wanting to share some conversation points. I would love to continue this discussion in the comments. If you have any thoughts about it, please feel free to share it. Tell me if you are a writer who doesn't have to let your projects breathe. Tell me if you're a writer whose projects need to breathe for massive amounts of time. Like 2 months was the longest I went without writing the second in this series, and it was on my mind the whole time, which is quite a stressful situation to be in. I think I really did put a lot of pressure on myself to try and finish that book much quicker than I necessarily would have wanted to in a different situation. But also I want to be able to get the second book out, because the feedback I've got from this, as much as I don't think a massive amount of people have read it, most of the people that have read it have reached out to me and told me that they like the book, and I love that. That feels so great. Thank you so much. but they're all really eager and excited for the second book, and like my in-laws, for example, are both there like, when's the next one? When's the next book coming out? When are you bringing out the next book? And I'm like, I don't, in a bit when it's finished. And and they're both just there like, when are you doing it though? Because I really want to read it. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you. I didn't realise you were that invested in this. And like, you know, it's one of those things where there's a polite, oh yeah, I'll read your book because you're family and it's the nice thing to do and I've got the money to spare to be able to buy a copy. And it's another thing to be a bit rabid about the next one. But, you know, rabid, sure, let's go for it. But I know that that has put me internally on this expedited schedule to do this as quickly as I possibly can, while maintaining a level of quality control, because I don't just want to put out shit because I can put it out fast. I want to put out a good book, and that will take however long it takes. Despite the fact that, you know, I have done books quicker in other situations, but those are sci-fi books, so I do wonder if there's something to be said for, like, I don't know. I guess we'll find out as my author career continues. I hope you found this video entertaining, if not helpful. Is this in any way helpful? Maybe it gives clarity on something, I guess. If you want to find me or my book, or a link to my coffee account if you feel like supporting the channel, or you've already bought the book and you want to support me making the next one, all the links you need will be in the description box right next to the like and subscribe buttons if you feel like sticking around. And before you go, there is a chance for you to win your very own signed copy of Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse and some super cool book swag, or your very own, I use mine as a pen pot, Guardian Cadet mug, along with some book swag, in my giveaway I'm running for the 1 year anniversary of the release of this bad boy, Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse, and an adult fantasy with action adventure, heathens magic, and a delightful slow burn heartwarming romance. If you would like to enter, you can sign up to my mailing list where you will get a secret word in my standard, it's the 26th of the month, or thereabouts, the Saturday after the 26th of the month, email, where I will tell people the secret word, again, because some people have already had it, where you will get 2 times the entries for this giveaway that I'm running, or you can just enter it now. The form is in the description box. The link to the form is in the description box, where you will just get the standard 1 entry, but you still have a chance to win it. All of the info, again, in the description box. If you would like to win your very own signed copy of Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse, or Guardian Cadet mug, and some book swag. I'll see you next time. Bye.